Yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming. It's fun. It's good. You should go watch it. Will it be on my best of the year? Probably not, because it doesn't really wow me, and we'll get to why it didn't wow me in the latter portion of this very brief review, because again, this is another movie I'm recommending. If you have enjoyed Spider-Man in the past on film, this is a pretty good reiteration of that. I know a lot of people have kind of felt a little burned out on the Spider-Man reboot specifically, but this is the reboot kind of a lot of diehard fans have probably been wanting for a while, because not only is it full integration into the MCU, but it actually kind of is the most faithful interpretation of the character I've seen on so far on screen. And don't get me wrong, I love the Sam Raimi movies. They're fun, they're goofy, they're kind of quaint, but you know what? I have a soft spot in my heart for especially that first film. I went to go see the first movie, God, what was I saying before? Like 12 times before it came out to DVD in theater. That year I remember the first time I saw it, I was wasted out of my mind. Anywho, Spider-Man Homecoming, yeah. This gets Peter Parker right, I feel. Peter Parker has never been more what I think of when I think of Peter Parker. Tobey Maguire was never really my Peter Parker. Yeah, there's a goofy side to Peter, but he's always kind of stayed in that mode whenever Tobey Maguire was performing him. Peter Parker, while goofy at times, develops a little bit more confidence as he goes on, especially in his career as Spider-Man. Has a little bit more of a sarcastic or witty edge to him, and that was something that at least Andrew Garfield, when he did the Amazing Spider-Man run, he had that attitude, I guess, or tude. He had that going for his Spider-Man. I never bought him as Peter Parker. That was the thing. He just seemed way too cool and at ease with himself to be Peter Parker. There needs to be a little bit of neuroses behind Parker. Tom Holland is finally balanced as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He's got the jokes, he's got the quick thinking, he's got the brains, he makes his own web fluid in this version, doesn't just organically come out of him, but he's also got the social awkwardness that works for him. But you can see where he's got some charm as well. You could see why a girl 2 years his senior, I believe, in this movie would be interested in the guy. So Tom Holland, I feel, gets the bookwormish side of Peter Parker, the everyman kind of neat guy, and also the Spider-Man aspect. All of that blends together really well in his performance. The rest of the cast is great in this movie. Michael Keaton, even though you kind of feel you've seen this villain type before, he's charismatic. You could buy him as this character. You could get why he's got a bone to pick with superheroes, and especially a certain armor-clad one. His crew, they're really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do with these Marvel Cinematic Universe integrated versions of the characters in future installments. We'll see how a lot of Sony's, what they're calling now the adjunct Spider-Man films, how they're going to play into this Spider-Man in particular. If they're talking about Sinister Six movie, Hard R Venom movie, Black Cat and Silver Sable team-up movie, it's going to be interesting to see how they can loosely, albeit loosely, try to associate all this to Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Yeah, I don't really have any problem with the main cast. The supporting cast is full of great people I enjoy. Again, this really isn't much of a spoiler. Donald Glover finally gets some due in the Spider-Man movie to a certain extent. Hannibal Buress, he only has 2 lines of dialogue in this movie, but I enjoyed seeing him on screen. He gives a great comedic performance. Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. Again, I like that they give her a little bit more to do. They give the character a little bit more energy in here. She's not just some grandmotherly figure who offers Peter sage advice. In fact, there's a really touching scene here. It's probably one of the more touching scenes I've seen in a Spider-Man movie between Peter and Aunt May, where they don't really say much of anything. It feels like this was actually written for real people. It feels like this movie was written for teenage actors playing actual teenagers. It doesn't feel like the Sam Raimi films where it's a 50-year-old dude writing dialogue for 30-year-old actors trying to pretend they're in their teenage years. It doesn't feel like the Mark Webb stuff where it's playing more into, I guess, his indie rom-com or, indie meet-cute type roots, and it's written for a sophisticated 30-year-old trying to play a sophisticated, but he's not supposed to be sophisticated teenager. As I said with Power Rangers, that was the more interesting part of the movie for me, was when he was just Peter Parker in high school. I really enjoyed his banter with his friend Ned, a Filipino-American actor apparently. So good on you, buddy. Get one in there. Like, he was legitimately funny. He was legitimately likable, and you love their dynamic, especially when he's trying to geek out and pick Peter's brain about all his Spider-Man stuff, because again, the trailers just show you that he knows who Spider-Man is, or that he finds out at some point, even though they kind of sort of forced in a little bit of a love interest story here. It wasn't heavy-handed like it would be in, say, the Amazing Spider-Man stuff or the Sam Raimi Spider-Man stuff. It's not that Hallmark Cardi type of look into each other's eyes, doe-eyed stuff. It feels like a legit, this guy is crushing on this girl kind of is crushing on this guy, and you just see how that goes, and boy, does that come back and get everybody in the end a little bit. I enjoyed the mentor-mentee aspect of the Iron Man Spider-Man relationship. Yeah, Robert Downey Jr. shows up, and actually, this is one of my favorite performances of him as Iron Man. I've enjoyed him in all the stuff immensely because Robert Downey Jr. is just that likable of a personality. Between this and his performance in Civil War, like, I could buy that he genuinely likes this kid and genuinely likes being looked up to by this kid. And there is a great scene, again, it's a scene you're anticipating to happen because you've seen it in all the trailers so far, where they get into sort of a confrontation. And not only do you see like how Tony Stark is kind of wounded by having to do this to the kid, but you see how much Peter Parker is wounded by what's going on. And both actors have such great chemistry together that, you know what, if Iron Man shows up in all these Spider-Man movies as sort of the mentor figure, I would be perfectly okay with that. If you're a Spider-Man fan, brace yourself, there's Easter eggs galore throughout this movie. If you know names and aliases for certain characters, boy, brace yourself, because it's chock-a-block full of kind of universe building in here. There's a character who we know as a big villain player who you guess maybe has sort of their origin in here. Like I said, Donald Glover, if you're familiar with the character he's named, boy oh boy, you must really love where this is gonna go, because it plays into a fan favorite possibly showing up in the potential future. And again, it could have easily gone the way of like, okay, everything's kowtowing to Avengers World. And in a way, the plot kind of does, because the plot has a lot to do with what happens after, you know, the fallout of an Avengers battle, let's say. That ties in very directly to what Michael Keaton as the Vulture is doing. At no point did it ever take me out of the experience. Like, it could have been a lot of like ham-fisted Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. style referencing, but the fact that it's put in the context of this high school setting, in this world where superheroes are the norm, you can imagine that a lot of these kids would talk about superheroes at high school. Like, there's a group of kids that talk about, would you marry, kill, or have sex with, you know, what Avenger, essentially. It's really kind of fun. And yeah, that's the way probably teenagers would actually talk if superheroes existed in this world. I also like that it lifts a lot of different styles from other movies. I know from day one everyone's been comparing this movie to like a John Hughes type feel. That John Hughes feel is there, especially in the high school stuff, but there's a lot of other fun stuff in there that I kind of noticed. There's a good 5-minute segment of the movie that feels like Her by Spike Jonze. And yeah, I'm not gonna maybe that gives away a little of what the context of the scene is, but it was kind of fun because I'm like, wait, this is kind of going into Her territory a little bit. And I kind of liked it because it was a very charming rapport, let's say, that's going on in that scene. There's a pretty intense scene with Michael Keaton and Tom Holland where it is basically the dinner scene or the restaurant scene from Heat, where they're just explaining to each other, or Michael Keaton at least is explaining to him, like, here's how it's gonna go down, kid. I didn't see this particular kind of setup coming for this intense a scene. I will say this, even though a majority of this movie, the major plot at least, was given away and spoiled for me in all of the trailers and marketing that this movie bombarded us with, there were a few surprises that really kind of won me back over. Whenever it was starting to get into a major plot point, like when Spider-Man's saving the ferry, you know how that whole sequence is gonna go down because they pretty much play all the highlights of it in one of the trailers that you can't escape from. Let's face it. A lot of people are out there saying, just don't watch the trailers, just don't watch the marketing. You can't escape from the movie marketing machine in this world, in this day and age. If it's not playing on YouTube, it's playing in your pre-screenings, it's playing in your actual previews in the theater, it's playing on pre-roll ads. On probably this video probably had a pre-roll ad for Spider-Man Homecoming, which gave away, like, here's the middle initial or here's the middle name of a certain character. Easter egg. Comment below if the Spider-Man Homecoming trailer actually played in front of this Spider-Man Homecoming review. It's everywhere. There's action figures already out there on the shelves, probably giving away major plot points. You can't get away from movie marketing these days. And again, there's a certain McChats I had with Jason Fury that goes well into detail about this. I understand movie marketing is a big thing, and we might as well get into the cons of this movie, which there's no cons to the actual movie. It has to deal with the fact that I went into this film knowing exactly what was going to happen, because, God, how could you not go into this movie unless you were like this for the past 6 or 7 months at all times? Because they're going to show you a Spider-Man spoiler somewhere. On TV, in a magazine, on the subway going past you. But at least there was still plenty of other surprises. Again, whenever the major plots started to take place, I'm like, okay, where's that one scene comes into play. And I started getting into my, okay, here's the movie making aspect of it. But then all of a sudden they'll throw something. Like, the actual homecoming aspect of Spider-Man Homecoming is very minimal here. It's more just of a thematic element than the actual dance, let's say. But the sequence leading up into that, I didn't anticipate that was how a certain dynamic was going to go. And you could tell someone had just walked in the theater when it happened, because in the very back of the theater, you hear one guy go, "Oh shit, what happened?" Like, he said it loud and clear enough that the whole audience laughed in response to that, because everyone was thinking, yeah, that dude just walked in at the worst possible time for a reveal. So there were genuinely enjoyable moments throughout this movie. It's a well-balanced movie. The action, the humor, the emotions, they don't get into the whole great power responsibility, you know, thing that we're all familiar with at this point. They know we don't need that. They don't even get into Uncle Ben that much. But I anticipate there's a little bit of foreshadowing, there's a little bit of referring to, or a little bit of alluding to, and maybe that's worthy of exploring in a sequel, which I'm sure we'll get to. Not only that, there's some iconic Spider-Man stuff here. There's one scene, even though it's a completely different setup and context compared to the original story that this imagery is associated with, a very iconic Spider-Man page. Like, the circumstances are kind of the same, the peril is the same, and the struggle for the main character is the same. And when this sequence happens, like, I was like, yes, I knew it. I knew this is where it was going, and I enjoyed that I knew where it was going. If you're a Spider-Man fan, if you've enjoyed the Marvel movies so far, this is just another fun addition to them. Other than that, there's nothing really outstanding going for it aside from the performances. Everyone does a solid job. There's a couple of cameos throughout this film that I was like, oh, I'm glad they showed up. I don't know how 30 seconds of work constitutes them being fourth on the billing, but whatever. People gotta get paid. Yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming. Go watch it. It's fun. It's probably the lightest of these Spider-Man movies I've seen, but that's a good thing. Looking forward to seeing more of this web slinger. My favorite so far. Thwip thwip.